Welcome to Mind Meets Body and Soul, a podcast that connects the dots between clinical mental health and spiritual holistic wellness. I'm Heather, a licensed clinical social worker and mental health guru.
And I'm Devon, a Reiki master, spiritual teacher, and lover of all things woo-woo. We're here to discuss various wellness topics, highlighting the connection between the mind, body, and soul.
We'll be offering nuggets of wisdom from each of our fields with the ultimate goal of bridging the gap between our two worlds. Whether you lean more into cognitive psychology
or flow with the woo-woo waters, our intention is to help you prioritize yourself and unlock a fresh perspective to healing, growth, and expansion. We're so excited you're here. Let's jump in.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Mind Meets Body and Soul. This is episode 16, and we are so excited to bring you a really fun special episode this week. Devon, how are you doing?
Hi, Heather. I'm doing well. Happy to be here for another episode, and especially for this special episode.
So this week, we have our third guest on our podcast. I am so excited to welcome my friend and colleague, Alex Bykowski. Alex is a licensed clinical social worker in New Jersey. He graduated with a bachelor's degree in psychology from Rowan and a master's degree in social work from Rutgers University. He's been working in the field for over 8 years and has a wide range of experiences from working as a case manager and also a therapist in a variety of different settings, including an inpatient psychiatric hospital, a nonprofit organization where he provides both in-home and outpatient therapy to children and to families. And in addition to all of this, he's a friend of mine turned employee at Growing Mindset Therapy, which is super fun. In private practice, Alex likes to help couples, families, and individuals overcome any obstacles that they're experiencing. And if I may, Alex, he says his favorite therapy-ism is you're either actively working for something to improve or you're allowing it to happen. So without further ado, Alex, would you like to say hello?
How you guys doing?
We're excited to have you here, Alex. Have you done any podcasting before, or is this your first time?
First one.
Nice. Well, welcome.
That is very excited, Alex, your first podcast. And we're also excited because you are our first male guest on this podcast. So a first for both of us here.
Not a lot of men in the field, unfortunately.
Speaking to that, Alex, before we get into some of the questions that we have for you, why do you think that this is such a female-dominated field? And what's your experience being one of like the few males that we have?
I mean, I do think just like the societal norms plays like a big part into it. You know, I feel like boys specifically, like as they're growing up, are pushed towards different fields, not so much towards healthcare, especially therapy. I mean, obviously there's a huge stigma around therapeutic services in men regardless, but men actually getting into the field and becoming providers, it's just not something that typically happens.
And if I may add there, ask what brought you to the field?
I have a lot of addiction and mental health issues within my family. So just experiencing those growing up, just wanted to help people, and because I've seen the issues and struggles people have gone through with those kind of issues. So.
Well, we appreciate you sharing that. And we find too, we talk often that like us as healers, as coaches, as teachers, as therapists, you know, we always work with our clients best, or we care for our clients best because we know how to based on personal experience. So thank you for sharing that. And it's beautiful that you're able to give back and help and guide your clients based on your own personal experience as well.
As a male therapist, why is men's mental health important to you? Like, why is it important that we specifically focus on men's mental health?
I mean, I think it's important just because, I mean, a lot of the data that's out there now just shows how men are struggling. The rates of depression in men are up. In terms of completing suicide, it's stark the difference between men and women. A lot of substance abuse, and men in general don't seek out therapeutic services as often as women. So because of that, just breaking that stigma is extremely important.
It is. I like to think that we are seeing also a rise in, men reaching out for support too, maybe because it's being more widely talked about now. I know, I see like celebrities all the time, for example, people who have a voice or, professional athletes. I do see them speaking out more about their mental health journey. Do you find that as well in your field, that there is an increase in men coming to you for therapy?
I primarily work with kids and families, but
Okay.
I do see a lot of those conversations happening. I know like Kevin Love specifically, basketball player, he like came out and talked about his anxiety. Pete Davidson, it's been an open book about all of his mental health issues. So just like keeping those conversations relevant and, in the media and open for everyone to see is extremely important, because that will give other men the opportunity to be like, hey, like, especially like a all-star basketball player like Kevin Love being like, hey, like he struggles with anxiety and like makes millions of dollars to play a sport, and it's somebody that like kids could even look up to. So just like recognizing no matter what somebody's life looks like, these mental health issues can still occur, and it's still okay to reach out for help.
Mental health doesn't discriminate to just like men or women. So it's so interesting that like as a society, at least here in like the US, women, it's more acceptable for women to like have feelings and talk about their feelings. Whereas like men, like when you're talking, Alex, you're talking about like substance use, that men die by suicide more often. So it's like so wild that I'm hearing as you're talking, like all these different ways that males are trying to cope and trying to manage these inevitable feelings and challenges that they face. Whereas like it's more acceptable for women to go talk about their feelings or just even like have those feelings. It's really sad, actually. I'm feeling sad like while you're explaining all of that.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's like what you said was important, because they aren't as open to seeking help. They do try to figure out ways to cope and deal with the mental illness themselves, which often leads to the substance use. They're just trying to numb themselves, to push through whatever feelings they're experiencing to make themselves feel better, but they're doing it in a toxic way, which leads to other issues within their lives.
Are you seeing in working, like I know we're talking in this episode a lot about men's mental health, but I think you're in a unique position in working with a lot of children, teens, families to be able to change or like set the stage for what the lives of these boys will look like once they reach adulthood. How does your work in working with children and families set that stage for like a different future for them? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, and that's actually part of the reason why I primarily do work with children and family, because I feel like I can make a longer lasting impact on these kids' lives. And also, when they start having these therapeutic services like at a young age, moving forward in their lives, if something does come up, whether it's like death of a family member, struggling with addiction, whatever, anxiety, depression, they can like think back on the time that hopefully they spent with me and be like, oh, this was a really positive experience. Why don't I try this again? Because it was helpful for me at that time.
Mm. I love that. And to reiterate what Heather said too, I think that is so powerful. You as a male working with children and being able to model what it looks like to talk through feelings, to, demonstrate that it's okay to we have these wide range of feelings that exist sometimes all at once. And I think that's really powerful, being able to give them the tools. Heather and I always talk about in this episode, or through our work, we always aim to leave our audience, leave our clients with a toolbox full of tools that they can use. So I can only imagine how great it is to work with kids at such a young age and to help them fill their toolbox full of tools so that as they're growing, they just naturally will know, where to go. I would be really interested in hearing, what that work is like with the clients that you have or the families or the kids, what kind of tools you do help them to put in their toolbox.
Yeah. And I mean, in terms of that, I do feel like literally anybody I work with, the number one thing that I try to push to improve is communication, because it's easy to internalize things, to hold things in and not express how you're feeling and just like deal with it through other routes. You have a bad day at work, you can come home, throw on Netflix or something like that and forget it happened, but those emotions are still there. So I really just push communication on literally everybody I work with, because if you internalize these feelings, they're going to come out and manifest in other negative ways.
I mean, that's music to my therapist ears, right? Like everything I say at all times is communication, communication. And I so often say, if I had $1 for every time in therapy, I tell a client, like, it's not so much about miscommunication, even it's lack of communication. Like we're just not saying the things that we're feeling. We're just not talking about the things. And then they're brushed under the rug and they come back later, or they fester into like bigger problems than they really even needed to be. So like, to me, the number one thing is communication. So I agree with you on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, terrible place to get this from, but there's this comedian, Chris Stefano, and he's like talking about the difference between having kids and not having kids. And like after he had his couple kids, he was just like, if you're single and like you don't have children, like you don't have real problems. Like you want to like break up with a significant other, like just do it. Like who cares? You have all the time in the world to fill your time with other things. So it's important to just kind of recognize like, yeah, you might have hard conversations. They might suck in the moment, but after you have them, you are going to feel better, and it's going to be like a weight lifted off your shoulders.
Yeah. And coming back to this, differentiation between men and women within the mental health field, as women, we do tend to be more chatty, right? We tend to be more social beings, and we talk about our feelings, or at least we vent to our friends about our feelings. So I could see how, communication is such an important aspect. And just because in the social nature, men typically aren't as communicative or open about their feelings with other men, with their friends even, how that could lead to some issues as well. Again, not gender specific. Communication is an area of need and skill building for all, but that's just what made me think of it as you were talking about communication.
I think that's like an interesting point though too, Devon, because I'm thinking now as you're saying that, like, even though I was never formally, I guess I was, like, we all go to school and we're like taught how to like, speak and everything. But like I, as a female, have so much experience and practice communicating with so many different people, with my friends, right? Like even just chit chat with my friend group looks different, I imagine, for most female groups than like male groups. Like it's just not as comfortable or normal or taught or encouraged even, I imagine, for like young boys and males.
Yeah, I mean, I would also say like the frequency that like men talk to their guy friends as like compared to women speaking to like their girlfriends is completely different as well. Like my best friend lives in Denver. I'll talk to him like at most once a month. Like, and like he's somebody like I would die for the kid. But like I feel like women will have like 7 different texting conversations with like 7 different girls like on a daily basis, and like guys just don't do that at all.
Yeah, that's really true. Very interesting. And even the content of those conversations is so different, right? Like the nitty-gritty details that like happen in my group chat versus like the conversations and the content of what I imagine the texts in your phone look like, Alex, I would guess are probably pretty different.
Yeah. I mean, I remember within the past like 6 months, there was like a meme where it's just like 6 things are coming after you, like pick 2 to like defend you. And it's like a hunter, like 1,000 rats, like 12 lions or whatever, like some crocodiles. And like my friends and I literally had like a 3-day conversation about it, like in our group chat. Like, just like meaningless. And like in the like the open world of our group chat, like nobody's like putting in like, oh, like I'm dealing with this hard experience, like unless there's like a death, when that's more so just being like, hey, like the wake is this day, like come by to just like show support for me and my family. But nobody's really opening up about how they feel emotionally in those conversations.
I find it so inspiring when I do see like groups of men coming together. I'll see TV shows, or I'll see, even with the people that I work with, where I do see like men coming together and openly sharing their emotions. I was watching the new season of Queer Eye, where the Fab Five, I think they're called, they go to a fraternity house, and they are working to restore order in this fraternity house. And they help them with their style. There's a man there that helps them communicate with their emotions. And to see them all gathering together around this, like, I don't know, bonfire at the beach, and they start openly talking, and to see them, express what they've been going through, and their roommates, their best friends, their fraternity brothers have no idea that they are struggling this much until they start opening up around it. And what seems to be the recurring theme in that episode, at least, and what I would imagine in other cases as well, is like, and I would love to hear your perspective on this, is like this, I don't know if it's like a male like protection mechanism or avoidance of seeming like weak, because the man is, supposed to be this strong provider, at all times, like taking care of others. So in the episode, what it came off as is like they didn't want to be seen as like anything less than like this strong persona that they have been carrying around.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that relates back to just like societal norms, you know. I mean, growing up, like you hear, I mean, big thing now is like you can't say man up or anything like that. But like even now, like I play soccer, and like somebody gets like shoved to the ground or something like that, like you're expected to just like get up. Like even if you're like a little injured, like get up, keep playing, because other guys aren't going to sit there and like baby you and like help you out through these tough times.
And with that too, I remember another part of the episode was not wanting to like burden anybody. So there is this almost feeling of like, your problems are your problems, and you don't want to throw them on other people as well. Does that seem to be a common theme, would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I'm actually working with a family right now, and the kid I'm working with like refuses to communicate any of his emotions really with his parents, just because he's like, I can deal with this myself, and he's struggling to deal with it, but he's getting by. So in his mind, everything's okay, even though he's struggling and his parents are doing well, from like a mental health standpoint.
So, Alex, I have another question, and it's kind of twofold. So, you're talking about communication and like how that's so important. So, the first part of my question is what does that look like, that work in like helping the population or the families or the children that you're working with, or even the adults? Like, how do you help your clients foster more communication or like have more communication in their relationships? And then part two, which is kind of related, but you could also just answer separately, is how do you involve parents in the work with like the children and the teens that you're working with? Because like you're working with this family for a couple months and then you're gone, right? You're part of like the past, but their parents are still in their lives. So do you involve parents a lot in these conversations and in these sessions?
So the way I typically structure a session is I'll start it working with the parents, just talking to them about how the week went, all that kind of stuff. And then I'll work with the child, get their perspective on how the week was, how they're feeling, and all that stuff. And then I try to end every session with us all meeting together, just to like set some like one or two goals for the week on something that can improve. Regarding communication in that aspect, though, just for one, I'll have kids, like, I'll obviously talk to them about their emotions. I'll try to have them journal something as well, in their own time that they would feel comfortable sharing with their parent, just so it's like out there in the universe, even if they don't feel comfortable sharing it in that moment. And then a lot of the work after the fact is talking to the parents about them being the ones to approach the child about whatever they want to know and opening those lines of communication. Because a lot of the times, like, the kids aren't going to come out and be like, hey, mom, dad, like, I'm feeling this way about something. I'm sure we could all look back at when we were teenagers and how closed off we were to our parents. It's not like those things have changed. But having parents just like consistently asking some probing questions about anything they're concerned about and opening up those lines of communication was extremely important. Because once you have a positive experience of that as a teenager, then you know I can go to that person again if something else happens like that, and it's going to be another positive experience.
What you just said there at the end too makes me think of this like huge connection between communication and trust. And you know what you just said, like working with the kids that you are, it's almost like, you know, they need to know that when they communicate, they will be met with a positive reaction or positive support from their parents. So there's a lot of like trust building that must go into that building of communication as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, if you share something that you're feeling or about your life with your parent and you're met with negativity, what inclination do you have to do that again in the future? Because you're just going to expect to be met with more negativity, which isn't something you want to deal with. You're just compounding problems at that point.
So then are you doing trust work also in the work that you're doing? Do you find like sometimes that's an important starting place?
I mean, I'll talk to the parents just about how important it is for that conversation to be a positive experience. I mean, I also think a big part of it is just kids and parents spending time together. I recommend like family game nights, even if it's like just playing like Connect Four or something like that after dinner, like something stupid where just participating in something together and conversations will just come up naturally. And again, help open up those lines of communication.
The connection piece is almost even like a prerequisite then to trust, right? So it's like, and it's funny because you said like, I'll recommend something as stupid as playing Connect Four, but like to me, that's almost everything. Because if we're not fostering that healthy relationship and making sure that we're having like some sort of connection to each other, then I'm not going to trust you. And I'm certainly not going to want to communicate with you about vulnerable, hard, emotional things. So I love that you're recommending family game nights and all of that. I remember one of my classes in grad school said, for every negative interaction in a relationship, the number could be changed or I could even be remembering it wrong. But for every negative interaction we have in a relationship, we need like 12 positive interactions. And that doesn't have to be these like big, extravagant things. But for every conflict, if we have to have 12 positive interactions, like that's a lot to like shift and tip that scale back. So I think that connection piece is so important too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, I do deal with some younger kids, so I'll ask them like what are like some activities you would like to do with your parents, but I also have to like preface it like you can't say like you want to go to Disney World every week because it's not realistic. But something simple like, I mean, I say Connect Four because growing up, like after dinners, like me and my mom would play Connect Four, and I could play like 12 games, and like I didn't even realize it, but I ended up like just spewing out like whatever was going on. Where if we sat down for dinner and she would ask me like, "Oh, how was your day?" The answer is good, and like that's it.
I think that's such an important question too, of asking, you know, kids, asking your clients. I find that I work mainly with adult clients, but just asking somebody, what do you want? What would you want? You know, what would be fun for you? Because I don't know, somehow like that question gets lost. Like we don't ask ourselves, we don't get asked that question a lot. So it must be, you know, pretty refreshing to hear that question from another person. Like, what would you want? And maybe that would be a game of Connect Four. Maybe that would be a movie. I imagine with kids, it's just like just wanting to spend quality time with family, doing something fun.
Yeah, I don't know. I know Heather watches Ted Lasso. I don't know if you do too, Devon. But there's like a scene in it where one of the main characters is like with his niece, and he's with another character who is like babysitting a child. And she's like, how do you like connect with her, like your niece? And he's just like, just tell her like, do you want to do things that I'm doing? And like she just wants to be a part of your life. So like he like jokes, like looks at her and like looks at the niece and goes, "Do you want to go to my podiatrist appointment with me?" And the little girl's like, "Oh, absolutely! Like, can't wait." And like, it's not like a fun activity at all, but like, kids just want to know that they're involved in, their parents' lives and to be a part of it.
And I think that that comes down to so much like with the we're talking about communication, we're talking about trust, they're also interconnected here. When that question of, what do you want gets thrown to the wayside, we stop valuing other people's opinions, other people's preferences, and then that kind of ruptures the trust because then that person's not feeling heard, especially if it's a child. That child isn't feeling heard. So I love how everything that we've talked about here, like there's so many things that are so interconnected that, otherwise we may not realize how important it is not to have just one, but to have all, and how all of them build off of one another too.
So I think we've kind of alluded to a lot of what you're going to respond here, Alex, but like as a male therapist, what would you say are some of the key pieces to forming like a solid foundation in therapy? Like when your clients come and they work with you, whether they're like adults or children, what do you see as like an important way to build that like solid, strong foundation for a client?
I feel like the most important thing too is just to connect with that individual. And obviously everybody's different, so the way you're going to connect with each individual client is going to be different as well. Doing like the in-home work, I'll play games with kids, card games, kick a soccer ball, throw a football, just like doing something simple that they enjoy, on top of obviously doing the talk therapy as well. And then for the adult clients I work with, just finding some kind of common ground, where we can like talk about something that we both enjoy, whether it's a sports team, coffee shops, whatever. Just having like a little bit of normal conversation with the shared interest to connect with that individual, I feel like makes a huge difference.
And then for your clients, do you need to do work to help them connect with themselves or connect with their parents or connect with their families? Like what does that work look like in the more like self-reflective connection or connecting with their parents and family?
Hopefully the audio quality is much better. We were faced with some storms the day that we recorded and some power outages as well. So the three of us are back and here to answer the question that we were left with when our connection went out.
So, Alex, as I was asking before we got disconnected, for your clients, what kind of work do you do to help your clients connect with themselves, to connect with their families, to connect with their parents, like more internal connections?
In regards to the clients like connecting with their parents or family, just like spending time in like those positive settings that we talked about before, really helps make that connection. In terms of like the clients connecting with themselves, given the population that I work with, a lot of the clients I work with don't really know who they are yet and are still kind of developing that. But I definitely work with them on just like being more self-aware, and like really focusing on like their actions and behavior and the potential outcomes that come from it.
And I think that's so powerful working with a younger population and bringing that self awareness. As many of us do, we start this type of healing work as adults, and like we're starting at such an older age. So I think that's really cool to be working with a younger population and already instilling in them many of the tools that they'll then take with them.
I imagine too, like I'm just picturing Alex, like I know you do some like play with them or you'll get outside and like kick a soccer ball around. I think you're like holding space for them to just even like question and explore and figure out who they are, where like I imagine a lot of people don't hold that space for them. So I think that in and of itself is probably really helpful for them to be able to feel safe working with you to just like figure out some of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think like not that it's like so much like play therapy, even though it kind of is, but just being able for like a kid to be around an adult and like talking about serious topics and then like be able to transition to like some kind of play where they're having fun and like almost like relax a little bit. Like that's a pretty unique situation that like most kids don't get in like their daily lives unless it's with a parent or family member.
Yeah. Really cool.
I love the play aspect too. It makes me think that it must be pretty fun in ways to have your job too, because your inner child gets to come out and, play sports, games, whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of what we do with our clients really actually greatly benefits us as well. Heather and I have talked about this in the past, like that bumper sticker with the rescue animals of like who rescued who. And, we talk about how our clients and the work that we do teaches us so much and helps us develop personally as well. So I would love to hear from you if and how working with your clients, whether they be kids, families, or grown adults, has had an impact on your own self-development and growth.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely has. Even though I primarily work with kids, I do work with some adults as well. And some of the issues that come up with the adults I work with, like, reflect in my own life as well. So I mean, sometimes I'll catch myself saying something to a client and be like, oh, like I should probably like work on that myself as well. But even with the kids that I work with, we all experience some negative things at times when we were growing up. And just kind of like looking back, be like, oh, like I'm working with a kid that's dealing with X, Y, and Z. And like it kind of mirrors some of the things that I've personally gone through. And just being able to like look back and like see how I dealt with those situations in the past and like how I can continue to work through like any of those negative experiences.
It does feel sometimes like our work is looking in the mirror at times, and I'll have that moment too where I'm like, oh boy, here it is, like I guess I have to, like, this is the universe or like whatever is like here because I'm helping you through this work, but like also like it's something I should probably shed light on. And I think it keeps us on our toes.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's important for everyone to remember there's no such thing as a perfect person. We all can do work on ourselves at any given time.
I take comfort in knowing that the people that I'm working with are also human, that they're going through the same experiences. Like there's definitely comfort in knowing that we're all experiencing the same things one way or another. So I love hearing all that you just shared about how your work with clients has taught you so much. So thank you.
I have a client who listens to the podcast and was like, oh, I heard that you're in therapy, Heather, like through the podcast. And I was like, yeah, like I am. I'm also imperfect and have my own stuff. And like, I think in therapy school, they're like, don't talk about yourself. It's not about you. And of course, it's not. I'm never going to go into a session and talk about me, but I want my clients to know I'm imperfect. I'm a human being first, and then I'm a therapist second. So like, I think that is an important part to just like be able to connect with people in a human way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, like you said, when you're in grad school, they do say like, don't say anything personally about yourself or like give the client any insight. But at the same time, like if you do have a similar experience to them, just being able to like share that with them so you can like connect on that level, like I feel like does make a huge impact as well.
So to wrap up then, Alex, you've shared so much with us throughout this whole episode, both in the first recording and in the second one. Are there any final remarks, any final thoughts, therapy-isms, tips that you have that you want to share with our listeners?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of started it off with my main one, where just like if you're not actively doing something about a problem or an issue, you're allowing it to happen. So I mean, that is kind of like my personal, just like phrase, just because I feel like in life you need to work hard and do whatever you can to attack a problem instead of just letting it occur in your life.
I say to my clients a lot that you have to play offense against a lot of these things, right? Like it's not just defense all the time. Like we have to also be like, not that I'm the sports person, but out like scoring goals and like getting points too, not just like defending against the other team. So I think that's like on par with what you're saying, like go out there and like do the work and attack the problem and fight it, because you do have a say and you do have control.
And I think that's also a really empowering way to view your life, that like you do have that power, you do have that control to change a situation if you're not happy with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, a lot of the clients we work with sometimes do need to hear like that they are responsible for whatever's going on and that they have to actively do something about it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Alex, for joining us in part 1 and in part 2. We've loved having you on as our first male guest and as a friend and colleague of Heather's as well. I take it that if anybody wants to find you, to work with you, they can contact you through Growing Mindset Therapy.
Yep.
So we're so glad that you shared this space with us. Thank you, thank you, thank you. If anybody does have questions or wants to connect with Alex, like Devon said, you can do so through my website, or you can just drop a question in the Spotify show notes section, and we'll be able to share that with Alex and then answer any of those questions that you may have. And we're excited for you guys to keep listening. Alex, thank you so much again.
Thanks for having me.
And we hope everybody has a great day. We are so glad that you took the time to share this space with us. We'll be releasing new episodes of Mind Meets Body and Soul every Tuesday, so be sure to give us a follow and share this podcast with those you love.
To connect with us and join our communities, head to the show notes where you'll find our contact information and individual websites. Until next week, stay grounded, keep growing, and trust that everything you seek is unfolding for you.